All right, all right. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we're going to be in the book of John tonight, John chapter 2. So, John chapter 2 is where we're picking up. Over the last couple of lessons, we've studied about John the Baptist, the voice crying out in the wilderness, and how he preached a message of repentance, preparing for the kingdom to come. We read about Jesus being baptized and the voice from heaven declaring, "This is my Son, in whom I'm well pleased." We talked about how this statement invokes a couple of different Old Testament passages, both from Isaiah and from Psalms, pointing at the Messiah, the suffering servant, the one who must die. In John chapter 2, which we studied on Sunday, John continues this theme by pointing out Jesus, and in a statement that's unique in the Gospels to the Gospel of John, saying, "That is the Lamb of God," reinforcing this sacrificial imagery. The idea of crucifixion and resurrection is going to come back in tonight's reading as well, as if it's important to John to preload this idea that the crucifixion was always part of God's plan. And to tell you the truth, I think that's an important thing to reinforce today. Because there are whole swaths of Christianity in the United States, or most notably, American evangelicalism, yeah, that's how we say that, who believe that Jesus had come to form a geopolitical government on this world, that he was going to physically rule, that the crucifixion wasn't supposed to happen, and that our place as Christians is to prepare the world for Jesus to return for what was Plan A and set up a physical geopolitical entity. The doctrine that Jesus' crucifixion was unplanned and the church was a Plan B has gained massive traction in some of the biggest megachurches across this country. And reading John, John makes it clear that the crucifixion was not an accident. It was not triggering God's Plan B. That it was the purpose of the Messiah to come here and be a sacrifice. John, you wanted to say something, man? Yeah. Thy will be done. Correct. This Lamb of God then in John chapter 2 went on and he started calling apostles. And we saw an early example of that principle of each one teach one. Because what do we see? We see Andrew go and fetch Peter. We see Philip go and fetch Nathanael. And then we read about Satan tempting Jesus in the wilderness. And we talked about the importance of those temptations, how Jesus would continue to face similar temptations throughout his ministry. We're actually going to see some temptation language come up tonight. And how each temptation ties to the cross. That Jesus would face all of these again, leading up to and at the cross. And that we face these same temptations today. Now, with all of that review packed in, let's read John chapter 2 together. Again, I'm currently in the New English Translation, NET. It will be interesting because sometimes it's like, oh, your translation might have one or two words a little bit different, something might be a little bit swapped, but it's all kind of the same thing. There's going to be one spot in here that, depending on your translation, may read not wildly different, but pretty significantly different. And we'll talk about that when we get there. Now, on the third day, John 2, chapter 1. Okay, so John is still by the way, I'll just throw this in right here, and then I promise I'll just read. John is still continuing from Jesus' baptism. Then on the next day he, and now on the third day he. All right? Now on the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there. Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no wine left." Jesus replied, "Woman, why are you saying this to me? My time has not yet come." His mother told the servants, "Whatever he tells you, do." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish ceremonial washing, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, "Fill the water jars with water." So the servants filled them up to the very top. Then Jesus told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the head steward." And they did. When the head steward tasted the water that had been turned into wine, not knowing where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, he called to the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the cheaper wine when the guests are drunk. You've kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this as the first of his miraculous signs in Cana of Galilee. In this way, he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there a few days. Now the Jewish feast of Passover was near, so Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Jesus found in the temple courts those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers sitting at the tables. So he made a whip of cords and drove them all out of the temple courts with the sheep and the oxen. He scattered the coins of the money changers. He overturned their tables. To those who sold the doves, he said, "Take these things away from here. Do not make my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will devour me." So then the Jewish leaders responded, "What sign can you show us since you are doing these things?" Jesus replied, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again." Then the Jewish leaders said to him, This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and are you going to raise it up in 3 days?" But Jesus was speaking about the temple of his body, so that after he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the saying that Jesus had spoken. Now, while Jesus was in Jerusalem at the feast of the Passover, many people believed in his name because they saw the miraculous signs he was doing. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. He did not need anyone to testify about a man, for he knew what was in man. And this is God's word. All right, let's break this up. Let's talk about the miracle in Cana first, and then we'll go on to the temple. It is kind of wild here. These two things paired together, right? One right after the other. But let's talk about that miracle at the wedding feast first. And again, remember, what did you notice while we were reading? What questions did you have? And what connections did you make? So talk to me about the miracle. What did you notice? What did you wonder? What did you connect? Oh, David, thank you. You have to, I'm not an auctioneer. You gotta, or just start talking. I don't care. Uh-huh. Okay, that's an interesting observation. So David talked about Mary's faith that Jesus could do this, though John is saying it's the first miracle, the first public one at any rate. But, you probably talked about this some last quarter. We kind of skipped over the birth of Jesus for the beginning of this quarter. Do you remember a phrase that kept coming up with Mary through Jesus's birth and boyhood? That Mary kept doing what? Yeah, Glenn's gesturing it. Yeah, she was storing things or pondering things in her heart. Treasuring, yeah. Like, in many ways, Mary was Jesus' first disciple. She had faith in who he was before she fully understood what that meant. And the case could be made that she didn't, as the other apostles, didn't fully understand until the cross and after. But Mary was kind of Jesus' first disciple. She was treasuring things up. She was pondering them. She was storing these things. And it leads us to this moment here where she understands that her son can help where others can't. All right, thank you. What else do you have? Oh, go ahead, John. Yep, that's what it says. It really is. Yeah. Did they need that much? Or did Jesus provide above and beyond what they needed? Yeah, John was making a point of just how much Jesus provided here. You know, the passage says that each container held somewhere around 20 to 30 gallons. And there's 6 of those. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never seen any place that sells wine by the gallon. Right? And here we've got, at least 120 gallons sitting here of wine. And when the steward says, like, this is the best stuff, like, okay, I don't know if you know this, but making wine is a science experiment any toddler can do. Get non-pasteurized grape juice, seal it up in a container, and within a couple days, it's going to ferment. Grape juice is like, it ferments like that. Doesn't matter what you do to it. So everything was wine. But the fresher and the closer to like that fermentation process it was during this time period before like distilleries and learning how to properly age wine, like would be the sweetest. It'd be the most palatable. It wouldn't just be bitter. He's saying, you've served the freshest, the best stuff, and depending on the time of year, and I don't know where the grape harvest is in relation to Passover. I really should have checked. I can't believe that's only occurring to me right now. In some parts of the year, it would be impossible to have that fresh and good of stuff because nothing was in season, and you couldn't refrigerate stuff when you shipped it. So the longer things traveled, the more bitter it was getting, right? You know, they didn't have pasteurization back then. So Jesus was giving them something that was possibly, depending on what the time of year, and again, I want to check, so don't hold me to that one, possibly almost impossible to get this time of year, but more so was above and beyond and abundantly more than they needed. So yeah, thanks, John. What else y'all got for me? Yeah, he did all of them, yeah. Yeah, go ahead. It is such an interesting conversation there, isn't it? Mary comes to Jesus and says, they're out of wine. Now the next thing he says, maybe the sentence that looked way different depending on your translation. In what I was reading, he says something like, why are you saying this to me? If you were reading from the King James, let me pull it up. I threw a bunch of translations in one place. If you're reading from the King James, he'd have said, what have I to do with thee? The ESV would have read, what does this have to do with me? The New International Version says, why do you involve me? And then the translation I'm reading out of says, why are you saying this to me? In the Greek, the literal translation is, and make sense of this for me, the literal translation is, what to me and to you? That's a super literal translation of the Greek there. What to me and to you? You can see why translators have a little bit of an issue getting this question to make sense. It's because it was probably an idiom. You know, when we say something like heads up, if I say heads up, what am I hoping you'll all do? Duck. Yeah, except what did I just say? Heads up, but I'm wanting you to do this, right? Idioms are notoriously difficult to translate. In contemporary text, this term comes up in different places. It comes up in legal proceedings, which is providing justice by righting a wrong that I've caused you. What of me, or to me, to you? What do I need to do to set this right? All right? But a more colloquial way of translating it would be, why is this important to me? And I think that's kind of how Jesus is using it here. Because we don't have an injustice here. We have bad luck on the part of the bride and the bridegroom. They ran out of wine. But no one came down and smashed up their wine or anything like that. We're not looking at an injustice. So it sounds like Jesus is more or less asking, why involve me in this? Why is this important to me? John. Okay. And almost every translation is going to render this almost the same, but some will use time. But more specifically, the word Jesus uses there when he says, my blank has not yet come is my hour. Yes. And 100% of the time in the Gospel of John, when you put the word my and hour next to each other, H-O-U-R, hour, not O-U-R, hour. Don't want to confuse you with the homophones. When you put my hour next to each other in the Gospel of John, 100% of the time he's talking about his crucifixion. It's like is it in Matthew? I haven't done as deep of a text dive into that one yet. It's pretty much every time Jesus says, my glory or my glorification, he's talking about his crucifixion. My hour, my time of fulfilling God's plan for me has not yet arrived. And I would say he's not rebuking Mary here. He's reorienting her. He's discipling her, just as he would any of the other disciples when they get their heads in the wrong priority space. My hour isn't about fixing the physical needs of people. It's about something bigger, grander. I'm reorienting you, Mary, towards this greater purpose. And in the context of this, I think it's also really important to point out, because it's hard to read it in English without it sounding disrespectful. Because most of the time, if I address someone as woman, I would never do that. But if I did, you would hear it derogatorily, wouldn't you? But that's not the word that's being used here. It's an uplifting word. It's a word of honor. It's a word of respect. It is a strange word to use for one's mother because it infers some separation. But it's still a term of respect. So Jesus is respectfully and gently pointing Mary's priorities into a different direction. But Mary, being the mother here, is having none of it for this particular moment. And she turns to the servants and just does what? She's like, whatever he says, do it. I feel my mom right there, right now. I'm just going to assume you're going to do the right thing and move forward as if you're going to do the right thing, sweetie. Bless your heart. And interestingly to me, Jesus goes through with it. And it's so cool because it does then create this miracle that's so full of symbology. And it points to the big picture of why he's here. So let's talk about that culture, the cultural perspective for just a second, if you don't mind me, blah, 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 for just a moment. Weddings in first century Jewish culture were week-long celebrations, okay? So that also tells you one thing. They didn't run out of wine because they didn't buy enough for the dinner after the wedding that people were only going to be there for a couple hours. This is a day after day after day thing for a week, excluding the Sabbath day. It's a celebration of covenant joy that celebrates God's blessings on family and community. It's more than about the couple. It's about family. It's about neighbors. It's about God and covenants. To run out of wine was more than an inconvenience. It brought shame on the family hosting the wedding feast. It disrupted this symbol of blessings. Think of how many times in the prophets wine and vineyards are used to symbolize God's blessings on his people. By this time in history, wine had even incorporated into the Passover feast, even though it wasn't part of the original, because it was a symbol of God's blessing. Now, these 6 stone jars, and it's hard to call them jars when they hold like 20 gallons, urns, John identifies them as things being used for ritual purification. You'd store the clean water in there for purification rituals. They filled them with this water. And Jesus replaces it with blessings of wine. Moving away from this is something you need to be purified to this is a symbol of your blessings and purifications. A guy by the name of D.A. Carson notes in the Pillar New Testament commentary, the water of Judaism is replaced by the wine of the gospel. Jesus redefines purification, no longer external washing, but internal renewal through divine grace. I'm done quoting by now, by the way. Jesus' response to this crisis was more than just compassion. It signals the arrival of the Messianic age, replacing those water containers with wine. Yeah, thanks for waiting, man. Go ahead, Keith. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Very few people in this whole wedding feast that knew anything about what went on.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it was really done to impress is not the right word, but to have any kind of impact on anybody else, except for it says that his disciples.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was done more for his disciples than anything else.
Yeah. And then by it being recorded by his disciples writing it down, by John writing it down, then it also impresses these things on us. Yeah, good noticing. Yeah, because remember when Jesus heals the blind person in the future of where we are right now, he's like, don't tell anyone about this. In this case, I made a mistake in my notes. He doesn't actually say, don't tell anyone about it, but John goes on to say very few people know what's going on here. But it strengthens his disciples. Again, including Mary. All right. Do I have anything else I wanted to cover regarding this?
Not as interesting as that. This first miracle is like the bookend, the start of his ministry. The other bookend, the end of his ministry, is the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses this ceremonial water used for purification, a ritual, which really does no cleansing.
Yeah.
Because it's ritual. And it kind of highlights the deficits of Judaism that does not provide purification.
Yeah.
And yet his cross, his blood, that is what truly allows us to be purified.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, John treats this basically as the start of Jesus' ministry. And it bookends then with the cross. The water of ritual purification that doesn't really cleanse anything to the blood symbolized by wine in the Last Supper of Jesus, which cleanses everyone. Good, thank you. Yeah, there's going to be another fun bookend in this chapter when we get to the next part. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts about Jesus already having disciples?
What do you mean?
Verse 11, it says, after he manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Mm-hmm.
So he already has disciples.
Yeah. Yeah, we established that in John chapter 2. Yeah, he was already there. John was saying, that's the person you need to go follow. And then we have Jesus calling out Andrew and Philip. And then they reach out to others. And there's always also this thing in when we get names of people in the Bible that those are the ones we have named. There could also have been more who were following along and paying attention that we don't have named yet. Yeah. I know, right? Yeah. Jesus having these strangers come to him and believe in him, but his own family struggles with that. And of course, we know eventually some of them come around. Yeah. All right. Do we want to talk about the temple now? Are we cool with that? Oh, by the way, John does treat this as one of the 7 signs in the book of John. Remember, John only records 7 major signs that he identifies. And this is one of them he chose to include. And if I'm not mistaken, Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong here, or anyone else, is this one unique to the book of John? That's your homework. Go check that out. Huh? Is this one unique to the book of John? It's not in the other 3 Gospels? Okay, so this is one of the ones that's unique to John. Because John does have stuff that's not anywhere else. And I always find that really interesting. Okay, so after this, John says, he goes down to Jerusalem because it's Passover. Does anyone see another book ending to the book of John in Jesus' ministry already? In the first chapter of Jesus' big major actions, he ends up on Passover in Jerusalem. His ministry ends on Passover in Jerusalem. All right, so there was my noticing. That's the only one I had in this section. No, I'm kidding. But let's talk about this cleansing of the temple now. Talk to me about what's going on here. What did you notice? Did anything Jesus did or say, give you any pause, any questions? Or were you able to connect it to any place else? Go ahead, John. Mm-hmm. Yep. Had to have been chaos. Yeah. So we have gathered in and around the temple complex. And let's be clear here. This is not Solomon's temple. This is not the tabernacle and the dimensions of the tabernacle. This is Herod's temple complex that he helped sponsor a reconstruction of, augmenting what the returned exiles had built, and it was a major center by this time. They call it the temple complex because you were looking at the temple and multiple dependent buildings that all fed into this migratory worship system. All right, so this was a big area, but yeah, John's right. It'd be jam-packed full of these animals. And why were all these animals here, by the way? Do you know? For sacrifices, specifically for people who were traveling to Jerusalem. Not everyone had livestock to bring with them, and even those that did may not have been able to always afford the expense and the complications involved with bringing livestock to Jerusalem. So this economy had built up in Jerusalem during the migratory feasts, where there were sheep and oxen and doves ready for purchase. Eric, did you want to say something? Yeah. And the currencies. And one historian I was reading talking about this said, what had kind of started happening that we see here, what became what started out as a pragmatic economy of, people are going to be traveling far. We need to have animals to sell them to do the sacrifices. We need everything from the good stuff down to the doves, because remember, doves were acceptable sacrifice for people who were living in poverty, who couldn't afford the better things, right? We need to be able to exchange currencies, had turned into a process of exploitation where exchange rates were not fair, where the exchange rates were profiting the exchangers, but hurting the travelers, where the price of the sacrifices were becoming exorbitant, where priests who were getting kickbacks from the merchants would look at what you brought from whoever knows how long away and say, I think that's blemished. You need to go buy one of those out there. And create a system of taking advantage of people. This wasn't just selling something. This was exploitation. Sometimes I've heard people compare this whole situation being like having a Starbucks in your church. But that does not actually cover it. It'd be more like if we had a third-party contractor renting out hymnals and you had to pay for hymnals every time you came to sit down. Oh, and also, you need to pay for those Lord's Supper cups that we use. And they're $20 a pop. Oh, and by the way, we're not telling you this, but the elders are getting a kickback from the people who are providing this to us. Okay, that's what we're talking about. It's not just selling stuff. It's corruption. All right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they did. Yeah, so John was talking about, exchange rates and profiteering off of exchanging people's currencies. And if you've ever traveled internationally, you know what this is about to some extent. The exchange rates change while you're on travel. You think you have so much to work with, but then exchange rates suddenly fluctuate and now you have less to work with than you thought. Or if you're very lucky, you have more to work with than you thought. And you're keeping track of it. Or if you're like me and you're traveling, you're just using a card, so you're always getting the most current exchange rate. However, you're also getting a little exploited. But it's not in the context of worship, so I'll just deal with the convenience. Anyway, this is the situation where Jesus grows zealous. But he didn't lose his temper. I want to challenge the notion that this is an example of Jesus losing his temper. He didn't fly off the handle. This wasn't spontaneous. Do you know how you can easily tell it's not spontaneous? He made the whip. You don't do that in 5 seconds. He took cords, he braided them into a whip. He had really good braiding skills, better than me. This was premeditated and it was systematic. Because what does he do? He drives the animals and the people out first. And you know what effect driving the animals would have on the people who are coming to buy these things? Well, they're scattered, yeah. But that sheep is now free. Jesus took away the cost of sacrifice. He took away the price that they would have to pay to these people who were traveling in. These animals that were leaving were now suddenly up for grabs. He equalized everyone there immediately. Number 2, after the animals and the people are driven out, then he throws the money out and he flips the tables, making it impossible for these people who were exploiting the poor and exploiting travelers to really recoup their losses. because now it's just going to be chaos in there. Anyone passing by can grab some of the coins on the ground. He didn't just get these people out of here. He made them lose money. And he essentially gave away the sacrifices that they were ready to sell for free. He provided redemption to the people of Israel so they didn't have to pay such an impossibly high price just to approach God. Do you see how this then fits in with the overarching mission of Christ? He removes the cost. Even if he has to scare away some people who want to keep everyone else away or gatekeep. Jesus intervenes on behalf of those who are being hurt. And says, my God, my Father's house. And notice he doesn't say the Lord's house there. He doesn't say Adonai's house. My Father's house. Not even our Father's house. My Father's house should not be made into a marketplace. I think some of your translations may go so far as to translate den of thieves or something like that. Maybe that's in a different gospel. Yeah, exactly. And then another weird exchange happens. We talked about kind of the weird exchange between Mary and Jesus. The religious leaders come up. What sign do you have to show us to prove you should be doing these things? It's not just like, what's wrong with you, man? It is the temptation Satan used twice. Prove you are who you say you are, because I doubt they missed the statement of my Father's house. Prove who you say you are on my terms. Show me you have the authority to do this. And then I wonder about Jesus' response. Why use the cross as his sign? Or not really the cross, the resurrection, right? Yeah. Go ahead, Glenn, you wanted to say something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good thought. Yeah. It's going to look like defeat, but it's going to turn into victory. That's going to be the sign. And of course, they don't understand at the time, right? Of course they don't. I mean, I don't blame them for not getting it right here. Like, I don't know if you've been keeping notes, but this temple right here, y'all, it took 46, thank you. 46 years to build, and you're saying you can rebuild it in 3 days? Yeah, I know you're a carpenter, man, but you ain't that good. Like, they don't get it, and it's fine that they don't get it. There are things that Jesus said that he didn't mean for people to understand right away. John tells us what the purpose of that statement is. John is always good at making those connections. I'm a John fanboy. You'll have to excuse me. John says that Jesus said that so that after he died and raised again, his believers, his disciples would remember he said that and go, this is what he was talking about. This is what he wanted us to see. And then it increases their faith. Because when was going to be the most important time for their faith to be increased? It's going to be after his death. That's when they would need the most. After he ascended and he wasn't there to keep reminding them of things anymore, that's when their faith needed to be strengthened. And John says, he said these things, we remembered it, and it increased our faith. Anything else before I tie this up? Go ahead, John. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So, yeah. Our John, made the connection to when Hebrews says, like, the blood of bulls and goats can never completely remove sins. You know, that Jesus was here among these people, faithfully still going through that ritual. And we have ritual purification then in both accounts in John chapter 2 then, don't we? There's our connection, by the way. The idea of ritual purification in both of those. One being a humble, simple affair, a wedding feast, humble compared to Passover at any rate, where all that was missing was the wine symbolizing God's blessings, to this huge thing at the temple complex where Jesus interceded and made sure the blessing of sacrifice wasn't taken away from anyone for the sake of money. We have all of these people faithfully going through this ritual purification, and Jesus died for them. And he died for everyone who questioned him too. Now, the last verse of this chapter is a little bit weird. I'm not going to do a deep dive into it, other than I really think it kind of belongs with the next chapter. Now, while Jesus was in Jerusalem at the Feast of Passover, many people believed in his name. They saw the miraculous signs he was doing. Remember, John doesn't record every miracle. Go see Matthew, Mark, and Luke for the other things that were going on in this time period. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. He did not need anyone to testify about a man, for he knew what was in man. Now a certain man, a Pharisee named Nicodemus, is establishing this principle that God knows what's in the heart of man. And it's basically saying men are kind of predictable. Our hearts are predictable. And then it starts the next thing with, now a certain man. And Jesus is going to encounter this Pharisee with a rather predictable heart. Something that it kind of acts exactly what we expect someone in power at this time period to act like. Go ahead, Katrina. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, this idea of like the destruction of the temple again, destroying Christ. Yes. Yes, good. And I'm gonna back up though, because I want you to see how John ties things together. It's really cool if you just read John all in a row and not break it up week by week. It is easy to read in one sitting. It's not a long book. Now a certain man, after they just made this comment about Jesus knew what kind of hearts men had, stands in contrast to the next one-on-one discussion Jesus is going to have in the book of John. In chapter 4, Tyler just preached a lesson about her. There was a woman at the well. And where Nicodemus is, the man, his conversation was predictable. The woman's conversation is anything but. And that's going to be a foreshadowing for next Wednesday because we're not going straight to John chapter 4 next time. Really quickly here, next time, if you don't have the outline, we are going to be in, yes, John 3 and Luke 3. So John 3 and Luke 3, just verses 19 and 20. Really, we're going to focus on John chapter 3. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a safe drive home.